To scale or not to scale? That is the question. And when I say scale, I mean to food scale or not to food scale. So, are you ready to measure your food intake? A little bit more on that in a second. Hey, my name is Brett Hamilton. I help busy people transform their lives by moving better, feeling better, and looking better with the least amount of input possible. And we try to do it in the most sustainable way possible. So, back to the idea of using the food scale. So check in with yourself for a second. Are you operating out of fear when you think about the idea of measuring your food intake, or are you operating out of abundance? In this case, meaning what knowledge could be gained and what are the upsides that could be gained from learning how much food that you're eating. So if you feel fearful, if that if it strikes fear in your heart, don't be alarmed, don't feel alone, because that's how I felt when I originally was confronted with the idea of measuring my food. In my head, I thought it was going to lead to a I thought it was going to lead to disordered eating, honestly, because then I was going to start being obsessive about my food intake. The other thing that I thought was going to happen was it's going to lead to be more restrictive eating. Because in the back of my head, I was like, well, what happens like when I have like pizza or cookies or donuts once in a while? Like then as soon as I measure that, then I'm going to realize, oh, crap, there are a lot more calories than I realize, and I really shouldn't be eating them. And then I'm probably not going to be able to eat them anymore if I start measuring it. Well, I just want to debunk that really fast. And that could not be further from the truth of what actually ended up happening. And then the other thing that ended up happening was that instead of leading to disordered eating, I actually improved my relationship with my food, because I found that I was actually able to incorporate those foods that I had been eating and enjoying, but I was able to do it in a way that actually supported my goals instead of in a way that sabotaged my goals. And that was the big game changer for me. And the only way I was able to achieve that was actually by measuring my food intake so I could have a better understanding of what was going on. So if you think about it this way, food is one of those variables that affects a lot of things. And it's an emotional thing, because when we're stressed, food is one of those things that people tend to turn to as a coping mechanism. It's very, very common. And another thing that ends up happening is that it's a social thing. And so food is enjoyed over social gatherings. And sometimes, depending on the type of company that we're with, we will operate in different capacities, meaning that we will eat a certain way when we're around certain people, and we do it totally subconsciously. And when we're around other people, we operate a different way and we eat a certain way. And again, it's a shift that we make without really being conscious of it sometimes. So we can fall into old habits when we get with old friends that we used to do and that we haven't done for years, just as an example. So the other thing about food is that when you reference it with things like your weight, your daily activity, your sleep, and your stress levels, then all of a sudden it paints this very clear picture about what's going on, and it makes weight trends very explainable. And that information is hugely, hugely powerful, because if we're tracking things like sleep and stress and water intake and daily activity and exercise and things like that, but then we don't know how much food that we're eating, that's like the one big thing that if food intake is fluctuating a lot and all the other things are being measured and managed really, really well, the likelihood of you actually seeing the outcome that you want to is very, very low, because that's the one piece that is holding somebody back from really truly achieving where they want to be, because it's just the one unknown. And as soon as we make the unknown known, then all of a sudden we've got all of the firepower, all of the ammunition that we need to make really good quality decisions. And that's where that food intake is going to come in handy. So check in with yourself for a second. If you're fearful of the idea of measuring food, what are you fearful of? So like I said, I was afraid that my food intake was going to lead to disordered eating, and I found it was the opposite. So I've tried things like what we call intuitive eating in the past, meaning that I was eating to try to achieve a subjective fullness level. I was trying to eat to what I call 80% full, where I was feeling content with how my body felt after eating. I was also trying to eat slowly so that I was allowing my body's natural satiation cues to trigger after about 20 minutes, so that my body was telling me, hey, you're starting to feel kind of full here, like this is about time to stop. And I was also checking in and measuring hunger cues. I wasn't like writing them down, but it's like you check in with yourself, like, all right, I'm starting to feel hungry. I'm starting to feel a dip in my energy levels right now. It's probably time to eat. And I was also measuring food via things like palm sizes. So instead of just eyeballing everything, I was at least referencing some hands as an idea of like, okay, how much of this food am I actually having? Well, I found all of these things work to a degree, but the problem is measuring fullness cues and measuring hunger cues, it really only worked well when I was eating more whole foods, more single ingredient foods. And by that, I mean, like if I was eating chicken, if I was eating rice or broccoli or bread, whole grain breads, things like that, it worked pretty dang well. But as soon as I introduced more processed foods, like if I wanted to have donuts, for example, or if I want to have pizza for dinner one night, well, those types of foods, they tended not to keep me feeling full for as long. And because of that, in order for me to reach that fullness level that I would normally try to reach, I would have to eat more of them. And so that ended up backfiring for me on a lot of occasions. And I would go overboard on those foods because I was trying to achieve that level of fullness. So actually measuring my food intake gave me a much better understanding of the amount of food that I was consuming when I was having those types of foods, especially. And so instead of leading to restrictive eating, it actually allowed me to learn how to plan those foods in to my day and still be on track with my actual goals, and not accidentally sabotage them by overeating them based on arbitrary fullness cues. And so in this way, measuring my food intake was a big, big game changer. And so that's where I'm going to ask you again, are you feeling ready? If not, what are the pros and what are the cons to you? Like what would be the downside of you measuring your food intake? And then what would be the potential upsides to it? And if the potential upsides are outweighing the potential downsides in this case, I would say it's time to start measuring. And that's how I came to the conclusion that for me, it was time to start measuring too, because I basically was sick of feeling stuck, and I'd been feeling stuck and in a rut for a little while. So long story short, next video, I'm going to show you exactly how to measure your food intake to the highest level of accuracy possible. And then we're going to go into what to do with that information, and then how to read it, and then what to do about it and how to move forward with it. Okay. So thanks for watching. Again, if this is something that was helpful for you, I highly recommend please share it with somebody who you think would benefit from